My boss banned working after 5 p.m. to save money on overtime. 3 days later, he lost a $15 million client and stood in front of the whole office trying to explain why nobody could save the deal. Nobody moved to help him. Nobody even looked up. That silence was the loudest thing I have ever heard in that building, and it was exactly what he asked for. My name is Derek, and I worked as an account manager for a mid-sized logistics company in Ohio. We handled shipping contracts for manufacturers, the kind of clients who call at strange hours because a truck broke down or a shipment got stuck at a border. The job was demanding, but I liked it. I was good at it. For 3 years, I stayed late almost every night making sure nothing fell through the cracks. Nobody made me do it. I did it because the clients trusted me, and I did not want to let them down. Then we got a new regional director named Gary. Gary came from a background in retail management, and he loved efficiency reports more than actual people. Within his first month, he started cutting things. Free coffee, gone. Casual Fridays, gone. Then he found the overtime numbers and his eyes lit up like he had found gold. He called a mandatory meeting on a Monday morning. He stood at the front of the room with a printed spreadsheet in his hand like it was a trophy. He said the company was bleeding money on unnecessary overtime and that effective immediately, no employee was permitted to work past 5 p.m. He said if anyone was caught logged into company systems after 5, it would be treated as a policy violation and could result in termination. He said this with a proud little smile, like he had just saved the company from collapse. I raised my hand and asked what we were supposed to do about clients in different time zones, clients who called after hours, clients who had emergencies that could not wait until 9 a.m. the next day. Gary looked at me and said, and I remember this word for word, if it is not done by 5, it was not a priority to begin with. Customer service is not more important than protecting this company's bottom line. The room went quiet. A few people exchanged looks. I did not argue. I just nodded and wrote it down. Because in that moment I realized something. Gary had just given me written permission, in front of the entire department, in an official company meeting, to stop doing exactly what I had been doing for free for 3 years. That night at 4:55 p.m., I got an email from our biggest client, a manufacturing company out of Michigan that accounted for almost 20% of our regional revenue. Their shipment was stuck at a port and they needed rerouting approved before their morning deadline. Normally, I would have handled it in 10 minutes. Instead, I looked at the clock, closed my laptop at 5 o'clock sharp and went home. I want to be clear, I did not sabotage anything. I did not delete files or lie to anyone. I simply followed the rule exactly as it was given to me. If it is not done by 5, it was not a priority. Gary said those words himself in front of witnesses in an official meeting. I was just following policy. The next morning I came in at 9 and found 17 missed calls on my desk phone and an inbox full of panicked emails from the Michigan client. Their shipment had sat at the port overnight, racking up storage fees, and their own production line had been delayed because a critical part never arrived. I forwarded the emails to Gary with a short note. Per company policy, this could not be addressed after 5 p.m. Handling this morning, Gary stormed over to my desk almost immediately. He asked why I did not just handle it quickly before leaving. I told him I did not want to violate policy since he specifically said after hours work could result in termination. I asked if he wanted me to make an exception. He hesitated because making an exception for me would mean admitting the policy was wrong, and Gary was not the kind of man who admitted anything was wrong. He told me to just fix it and walked away without answering my question. Word spread through the department fast. My coworker Priya, who handled the West Coast accounts, realized the same thing I had. A client in Seattle needed an urgent contract revision sent over by 6 p.m. their time, which was 9 p.m. ours. She closed her laptop at 5 sharp too. Another coworker, Marcus, had a client emergency come in at 4:45 and he spent exactly 15 minutes on it before shutting everything down, leaving the issue half resolved. None of us said a word to each other about it. We did not need to. Gary had drawn the line himself. We were simply standing exactly where he told us to stand. By Wednesday, the Michigan client was furious. They had lost an entire day of production because of the port delay, and now the same account manager, meaning me, could not respond to their evening messages because of some new policy nobody outside the company understood. Their VP of operations called and asked to speak with someone in charge. Gary took the call personally, probably thinking he could smooth things over with confidence and a firm voice. It did not go well. I was not in the room, but I heard from Priya, who sits close to Gary's office, that the call lasted almost 40 minutes and ended with Gary practically shouting into the phone trying to convince them not to walk. She said his voice cracked near the end, which is not something people usually mention unless it was memorable. Thursday morning, corporate flew someone in. Not just anyone, but the VP of Client Relations, a woman named Linda who had built half of the company's biggest accounts over 15 years. She called an emergency meeting with our whole department, and Gary sat in the front row looking like a man who already knew what was coming. Linda asked a simple question. Why did nobody respond to the Michigan client after hours when this had never been a problem before? Gary opened his mouth to answer, but I raised my hand first. I explained calmly that new department policy prohibited any work-related activity after 5 p.m., including checking emails or responding to client calls, and that violating this policy could result in termination. I said I had documentation of the policy being announced in Monday's meeting. I said I had simply followed it exactly as instructed. Linda turned to Gary. She asked if this was true. Gary tried to explain that he meant it more as a guideline, something about discretion and using good judgment in urgent situations. I calmly reminded the room that he had specifically said if it is not done by 5, it was not a priority, and that any after-hours activity would be treated as a violation. I mentioned I still had the meeting notes if she wanted to review them. Priya and Marcus both nodded and confirmed they remembered it the same way. You could see it happening on Gary's face. The exact moment he realized there was no way out of this. He could not say the policy was flexible without admitting he lied to Linda, and he could not say the policy was strict without admitting he was the reason a $15 million client almost walked. Either way, it was his decision, made in front of the entire department, with witnesses and a paper trail. Linda did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She simply said that effective immediately, the after-hours policy was rescinded, and that any employee handling client emergencies outside of standard hours would be compensated properly for their time going forward. Then she said something I will never forget. She told Gary that she would need to speak with him privately, and that word choice, privately, in front of a room full of his own employees, was somehow more humiliating than if she had just yelled at him. We found out 2 days later that Gary had been placed on a formal performance improvement plan. Not fired, not yet, but stripped of decision-making authority over departmental policy. Every policy change now had to be approved by corporate first. His little kingdom of spreadsheets and cost-cutting ideas was gone. The Michigan client stayed, but only after Linda personally called their VP and offered a discount on their next contract along with a formal apology. I found out later that keeping that account required concessions that cost the company more money than 3 years of my unpaid overtime combined. Gary's genius plan to save money on overtime had ended up costing the company far more than it ever saved. 2 weeks later, in a smaller meeting, Gary stood in front of the department again. This time his voice was different, quieter, careful. He said he wanted to apologize for how the after-hours policy was handled and that he appreciated everyone's patience during the transition. He did not use the word wrong. He did not admit fault directly, but everyone in that room knew exactly what had happened, and so did he. Nobody clapped. Nobody said it was okay. We just nodded and went back to work because that is what professionals do. But I noticed something small that stuck with me. From that day forward, Gary stopped walking around the office checking who was logged in after 5. He stopped mentioning overtime numbers in meetings. He stopped smiling that proud little smile whenever he found a new way to cut something. The overtime policy was never brought up again. Client emergencies after hours became something the company actually planned for, with proper compensation and a real system instead of empty rules made by someone trying to look good on a spreadsheet. I still stay late sometimes when a client really needs it, but now I get paid for it. And more importantly, nobody can ever again tell me that doing my job properly was not a priority. Gary transferred to a different region about 4 months later. I heard he still talks about efficiency in meetings, but I also heard nobody really listens to him anymore. Some lessons only stick once they cost you something big enough to remember, and Gary's lesson cost him almost everything he thought he had built.